The Andy Poland Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Who'd have thought we'd be rolling into June with a raging controversy about Caitlin Clark? She captured the country in March in a beautiful way. And now she is a hot button in sports. We will deal with that. Also, 50 years ago today, we had 10-cent beer night in Cleveland. You chalk that up as one of those, well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. Oh, it was not a good idea. And Fred Frommer has a very interesting look back at it in the Post today, and I'll play some of the sound of that that happened 50 years ago today at Cleveland, which is just unbelievable when you look back on it, and a number of other things to get to as we roll into a Tuesday here in the late stages of spring, getting ready to roll into summer. And I will start with this. It was a story at the front page of the Post yesterday from Jerry Brewer, who is a sports columnist, and I guess this is considered to be a column, not necessarily a story. But he explores where the real fracture in sports has come from. And he traces it back 7 years ago when Donald Trump was appearing in Huntsville, Alabama. And the lead of the column is, at this sports crime scene, a great myth suffered a random death. The games we love lost their unifying superpower here. It ruptured in a soundbite. The president shouted, "Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, 'Get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired'?" Jerry writes, his taunt became the sound mark for sports discord. And, you know, over the years, talking about sports, playing sports when I was a kid, not very well, but loving sports, watching so much sports, the narrative has always been that this is a unifying presence, that blacks and whites work for a common goal. They put their differences aside and they try to win. And that's what it's all about. And I think this was articulated about as well as it possibly could be by Bill Curry, who was a Super Bowl champion player with I believe he won Super Bowls with both the Colts and the Packers, certainly with the Packers. He was a longtime coach in college football, Georgia Tech, Kentucky, Alabama, finished up at Georgia State, then became an analyst for ESPN. Really one of the classiest guys I've ever listened to, and someone who has a deep understanding of race and culture, having grown up in the South and then coming to the NFL and realizing everything that he had been taught growing up was wrong, and the way he looked at his teammates and how his world changed and how he articulates it so well. And he once did I guess it was off the cuff, but then he refined it a little bit by writing it about what it means to be in an NFL huddle or a football huddle. It doesn't have to be the NFL. And this is what he articulated in 2 minutes about what that's like.
The football huddle is a metaphor for our culture, imperfect like all metaphors. In that huddle is a bunch of folks that are black, brown, white, red, yellow, liberal, conservative, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, Buddhist, and Hindu. We are slim, fat, short, tall, fast, and slow. We are analytical people, and we're impulsive people. We have some of the finest men on earth, and heaven knows we got a few rounders. We have been through the fires of Bear Bryant and Bo Schembechler or some such coach that knows exactly how to extract every ounce of our energy. Americans see all that and they resonate with it. They crave it. They take it and us into their hearts. The men who earn a place in the huddle have experienced the miracle of team. The training camp experience is unbelievable. It is day after day, week after week, 2 a day, 3 a day practices in the heat, often in 14 pounds of equipment. Many drop out, numbers thin, and everybody thinks about quitting. Trust me, everybody. For those who do stay, there is the opportunity to participate in the greatest team sport ever devised. It is the only sport in which every player needs every teammate on every play just to survive. We learn ever so slowly that our differences do not matter in the huddle. When we trudge in after each interminable workout, we know that sweat smells about the same on everybody's body. When we get busted in the mouth, that blood that trickles is the same color. Everybody's tired. Everybody's hurt. It is in this process that the miracle occurs. Men who've been raised to hate each other's guts become brothers. I've seen racists reformed. I've seen the most unlikely hugs after victories or losses. I've seen inner city kids invite country boys from the mountains to go home with them for Thanksgiving dinner, and I've seen those invitations accepted and reciprocated, thus changing parents' lives. Our players become brothers for life. It is what America is supposed to be, could be, might be in our best dreams.
In our best dreams. That's Bill Curry on a football huddle. And that's something that I've always believed in, maybe you as well, as a sports fan, that has been a unifying presence in our lives for a long time. And as Jerry Brewer articulates in the Post in this big story yesterday, it may now be a dividing line because of a variety of factors, including what Trump said 7 years ago. I'll just read you a couple of paragraphs that really stood out for me in the story. And it's a long piece. It'll take you probably a half hour to read it. But I urge you to do it because I think it paints a picture of what has happened in a relatively short period of time after all the strides that we seemingly made with the help of sports and what we've now had experience in the NFL and in other places, not just the national anthem kneeling and what we went through the George Floyd tragedy and everything else. Just these couple of paragraphs from Brewer. He said, "I used to have no doubt about the unifying superpower of sports, how they turn strangers into teammates and teammates into family, how they make community out of motley spectators, how they raise the curtains for societal progress. I used to believe it was an imperishable kind of magic. I don't anymore, or rather I can't. Division has seized too much control. It is the embrace of these divides, rather than the newness of them, that spoils our ability to unite around anything, even the fun stuff. There is almost nothing fresh about the issues barricading us, except for the commitment to be angry and inhuman, vindictive and regressive, insincere and obtuse, to feel threatened and to become a threat in response." That's very well done by a terrific writer in Jerry Brewer. And as we move forward into this summer, and the Caitlin Clark story is an example of that. And if you don't believe it's about race, you're fooling yourself. It is. And Mike Wilbon talked about that very well last night on PTI. We'll get to that in the next hour. But that's where we are right now. Can we get to where we're talking about sports in the same way that Bill Curry talks about the huddle? I don't know. Look what's happened in this relatively short period of time, and whether we can get that back, or if maybe we never had it, maybe it was hidden, and maybe this underlying current of hate was always there, and it needed something to bring it out. But it's depressing, and I have loved sports my whole life. I've made it a career, yakking about it. I loved it, but it is an issue now, and good for Jerry for articulating it as well as he did. Hank Allen has passed away at the age of 83. If you are a fan of the expansion Senators, as I was, you remember Hank Allen with some of the others who played on those teams that weren't very good, like Tim Cullen. The star, of course, was Frank Howard, who passed away within, I believe, the last year. Paul Casanova was the catcher. Mike Epstein at first base. Dick Bosman was their best pitcher. Those are names that stand out for me all these years later. So now we learn of the death of Hank Allen. He is, or was, the younger brother of, well, first he was Richie Allen when he played with the Phillies, and later with the White Sox, Dick Allen, famously on the cover of Sports Illustrated, juggling baseballs with a cigarette hanging out of his mouth. And he was somewhat of a lightning rod, but a great, great player, and probably should be in the Hall of Fame. Hank Allen, much lower profile, played several years in Major League Baseball, then went on to a post-baseball career as a thoroughbred trainer, and once had a horse in the Kentucky Derby. But sad to learn about the death of Hank Allen at the age of 83. Also this, kind of local, Logan Thomas was here last year with the Commanders. Actually had a pretty decent year, caught 55 passes for 496 yards, 4 touchdowns. He has signed with the San Francisco 49ers. So he'll be a backup to George Kittle. They had their backup last year, Braden Willis, didn't catch a pass in his rookie year, so a little bit of depth there. And forgot about this. You think about the Taylor Heineke high point for the Commanders, which was, I believe, his first start. It was against Tom Brady and the Buccaneers in that playoff game, and he'd come off the bench at the end of the season and now got his start in that playoff game. And I was expecting the worst, because he hadn't played much. He was a guy who was brought in as a COVID quarterback. They were hoping that he wouldn't take the field. They just had him as an emergency. And we remember Heineke diving for the pylon. That was like the signature play of his career. Well, it turned out, I forgot about this, Thomas had a good game. He caught 74 passes. It caught 5 passes, and it was a close game. Brady was going to win, and he did, and they went on to win the Super Bowl. But Logan Thomas may have something left in the tank at the age of 32 and playing on a team that went to the Super Bowl and backing up what might become a future Hall of Famer in George Kittle might be the best thing for his career. All right, legalized betting in baseball. What was going to be the effect of this? It's been, how many years since Pete Rose was banned? Wow, 35 years. Yeah, 1989. I was at that news conference when Bart Giamatti banned him for life. The deal was that he could apply for reinstatement the following year, but that never happened, and he's remained banned from baseball all these years. Well, now we have baseball in bed with DraftKings and other betting services, and the latest is that Padres infielder Tucupita Marcano is facing a lifetime ban for betting on baseball while he played with the Pirates and wagering on Pirates games, according to ESPN. We've had Toronto Raptors forward Jonte Porter banned for life for betting on the NBA. 4 other minor league players are facing potential discipline for betting. And we've had the Shohei Ohtani story that came out. This is not exactly what baseball wants. They want all the money that comes in from gambling, but you've got players, especially Dominican players and players from other countries, not completely fluent in what goes on and the language and so forth, and they get involved in these things, and it costs them their career. Since the Supreme Court's 2018 ruling, so it's 6 years now, that we could have legalized betting in the U.S. on sports, 12 NFL players, an assistant coach, and an undisclosed number of league personnel have been suspended for violating gambling policy, in addition to the Porter banishment from the NBA and what is expected to be the banishment for life for Tucupita Marcano, who's only 24 years old. Not a star. He was released by the Pirates and claimed by the Padres over the winter, but man, that is a steep price to pay because he was wagering on his team. And the temptation is there to bet all the time. What do they tell you in all the commercials? Bet, 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 bet. So he bet, allegedly, and now may have ended his baseball career in that way. James Worthy was a guest yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show. And in the wake of all the Caitlin Clark controversy, like the welcome to the WNBA that she's getting from other players, getting slammed to the floor, getting bounced around, and nobody seems to want to defend her. And it's, kind of the indoctrination that goes along with being a rookie in some sports. But this is a player that is the golden goose. People are watching the WNBA because of Caitlin Clark. And we'll get more into that in 10 o'clock with partly with what Tony and Mike said last night on PTI, and also some comments from Chennedy Carter, who slammed Caitlin Clark to the floor in a game on Saturday. That's now been upgraded to a flagrant foul, but not a suspension. And then Angel Reese, who seems to think that the WNBA is more about her, or that the story of this is more about her than Caitlin Clark. Yeah, we'll get to all that coming up. But this was James Worthy, who was a rookie with the Lakers in 1982. At that point, they had already won 2 championships. Magic Johnson had emerged as maybe the star player in the league. They had Kareem. They had a really great team. And he steps into the league as the number 1 overall pick, more shrewd trading by the Lakers and Jerry West to have the number 1 pick off a championship team. And he winds up in Los Angeles, looks around, and, he got a comeuppance. This was Worthy describing what happened to him in 1982.
So I came into the league, number 1 draft pick. I wasn't arrogant, but I was confident. I came in the Laker training camp and I was looking around and I was saying, look, I'm good enough to start here. And I walk in, there's Kareem, Magic, Jamal Wilkes was still with the team, and Norm Nixon was still there. And so Kurt Rambis walked in. And I looked at him and I said, he had these big glasses on with the duct tape holding them together. He smelled like Ben Gay. He had all these apparatuses on, slow. And I said in my mind, I'm going to get that damn spot. Okay, within 15, 20 minutes of practice, Kurt Rambis showed me what a real power forward was in the NBA. And I had to go sit my ass on that bench for a couple of years because he wasn't having it. Okay, I went from power forward to small forward. So I understand the initiation and how how players look at you. It's part of the game. I don't like the blind spot. If you're boxing somebody out or somebody's coming to the cup, I don't like, coming from behind doing something like that. But that is part of the, welcome to the WNBA. It just is.
But every team had an enforcer, it felt like back then, didn't they?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, most teams, ours was Kurt, Mitch Kupchak came in, started a fight with Akeem Olajuwon in 1986, got him kicked out of the game, but we still lost. Everybody remembers Maurice Lucas. I remember guys like Calvin Nat and Lonnie Shelton, Bill Lambier. They were enforcers. When they came in the game, Greg Kite. When he came into the game, it was going to be a foul. So yeah, they were enforcers for sure.
Yeah, that's James Worthy yesterday with Dan Patrick. The funny thing about Rambis and with the glasses, and maybe it was because of the movie Slapshot with the Hanson brothers, who also wore those horn-rimmed glasses, that people think to this day that it was Rambis who put Kevin McHale on the floor. It was McHale who clotheslined Rambis. I mean, nowadays that would have gotten him like a 10-game suspension. He got hit with a foul. It wasn't even a technical foul, as I remember, and the series played on. But sometimes looks are deceiving. Now, Rambis was a tough guy, and as Worthy points out, knew the tricks of the trade. And he's a guy who kind of bounced around. I think he played at Virginia. The Knicks had him for a while. He played overseas, and he winds up finding his place with the Lakers as part of an unlikely member, I should say, of the Showtime Lakers. It almost feels like he would have fit in better with the Celtics. But he did play with the Lakers, and Worthy got a lesson when he came up as a rookie. More from Worthy. This is on Pat Riley. And, if you've ever listened to a Dan Patrick interview, he just segs from one topic to another. Doesn't say, hey, we're shifting gears here. No, he just asks questions. That's what I think partly what makes him such a great interviewer. But in this day and age where we have coaches who are pretty much selected by the stars, LeBron decides who he wants to coach him, even though Brian Windhorst says he doesn't get involved in the coaching search. They know what he wants, and they get it for him, so he doesn't have his hands dirty in saying, I chose this guy. But by and large, if the superstar doesn't want the coach is gone. Pat Riley had a group of superstars, young and old, Kareem, Magic, Worthy, young guys and old guys, but he was able to coach in a way that was old school. And this was Worthy describing to Patrick how Riley coached those Showtime Lakers.
He was tough. It was a time when players would accept the truth, and they would accept where the coach was coming from, criticize. Yeah, we got pissed sometimes, but the video didn't lie. It was old school. Rouse, he prepared us, and he had the team as one. Kareem and Magic started that before I got there. They realized that he was very, very tough, but that's what it took in the 80s, man. It was hard to get past Utah and Dallas and San Antonio. And Rouse kept us, he kept us afloat for many, many years. And, we appreciated it, even when he made the guarantee that, we won in 87, and he guaranteed that. And most of it was hung over that morning. And we were like, what did he just say? But he knew we needed that. He knew because the Lakers had won one championship here and there. He knew that's what we needed. And then that kind of philosophy and, psychiatry worked with us.
Yeah, that was the last one that Riley won with the Lakers. And if Isaiah Thomas doesn't hurt his ankle, Pistons might have won that. They might have won that series, but the Lakers were able to win and go back-to-back as they did in 87 and 1988 to win the championship. Last thing from Worthy, who works as an analyst on Laker broadcasts, I think it's radio, and he was asked about the upcoming draft. Now, the Lakers have the number 17 pick. Bronny James is projected somewhere in the 50s for the draft. They believe coming off the combine that he's going to be good enough to be drafted, but not in the first round. But there is also the LeBron factor, and how much do they want to pacify LeBron with the Lakers? So Patrick asked him, do you think it's possible that the Lakers with the 17th overall pick, not a lottery pick, but pretty darn close, with the 17th overall pick, would actually select Bronny James in the draft at the end of the month?
Yeah, I could. I know, unfortunately, I don't want to say unfortunately, but it's just the way the league has grown. The trend of what's happening, social media, load management, there's so much going on. And I think LeBron stands in the same as like Griffin Sr. and Griffin Jr., Gordie Howe and his sons. He wants to get it done, even if it's just for a week. So I could see them, maybe being on the Laker team or the G League, and then there's a big national game coming up in a couple of weeks. They'll pull him up, and there you'll have it. Oh. Son and father playing. So yeah, Bronny's got a lot to prove. I think, I think his combine was pretty good. So we'll see. At 6'1", it'll be a challenge, but it could be done. We've seen others.
It could be done. And 17, not normally where you draft a star, but you never know. Second-round picks become stars. And do you want to use the 17th overall pick on a player who right now, the reality is he's going to be exactly what Worthy described, a G League guy, back and forth, two-way contract. And if you want to make a big hoo-ha, you bring him up to play with his father on a national TV game. It'd be good for the league. It would certainly create a lot of attention. But the Lakers don't need Bronny to sell tickets. But LeBron wants Bronny, and pretty much what LeBron wants, LeBron gets. He not only runs the Lakers, it seems, he runs the league. All right, a little bit of baseball. And if you've been following what the Yankees have been doing, it's really remarkable. I guess it shouldn't be, given what their payroll is, but you've got now Aaron Judge playing as well as Aaron Judge can play, and you got Juan Soto doing pretty much what Soto was able to do here as part of the World Series team, and maybe even better with Judge batting behind him. So yesterday on PTI, Tony and Mike took a look at this and looked at the weekend that Judge had in San Francisco. And here are the Yankees sitting now with the do they have the best record in baseball? No, they're tied exactly with the Phillies at 42-19. But off an off night last night, coming off a big series with the San Francisco Giants. And listen to the comparison. And I'm sure Tony's going to get blowback on this, but listen to the comparison that Tony makes with Soto and Judge on the Yankees as the two of them discuss the big weekend for Aaron Judge.
Judge went 6 for 10 with 3 home runs in a weekend sweep of the Giants. And for the month of May, he had 361 with 14 home runs and an OPS of nearly 1,400. Judge's production had tailed off ever since his toe injury 1 year ago today. Tone, should we officially stop now worrying about that with Aaron Judge?
Happy anniversary, Aaron Judge's toe. Let's go over these numbers one more time if we could. On the weekend, 6 for 12, 3 homers, 6 RBI. That's a great weekend. Mike, in my condition, it's a lot better weekend than I had. Let's go over the May. 361, 14 homers, 27 RBI. He also had 26 extra base hits. The last Yankee to have 26 extra base hits in that month is Joe DiMaggio. Mickey Mantle didn't do it. Derek Jeter didn't do it. That's a terrific May. So whether this toe is ever completely healed or not, Aaron Judge seems to be learning to live with it. But I will say this, Mike. He has helped immeasurably this year by having Juan Soto out there with him. Yeah. Here's Juan Soto's weekend. 6 for 12, 2 homers and 4 RBI. I'm going to say something that's going to make people angry. Right now, they're Ruth and Gehrig. And I mean that. They're 1-2 in all of baseball in OPS. In the next 10 to 14 days, we're going to talk a lot about Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving. Judge and Soto are better than them right now in their sport.
I'm glad you mentioned Mickey Mantle. Because if we're going to talk about injuries and how long people have to put up with them, and Aaron Judge said, I'm going to have to deal with this, deal with it forever. Mickey Mantle played if he played, 16 years, 16 seasons, something like that, he had to play 13 or 14 of them, as you know, after stepping in that drain pipe or whatever it was. And his knee was never, he was at his greatest physically at 18. And he had to deal with that. And athletes, and you and I know this from being in locker rooms, there are things people never disclose. Or they show you at their locker and say, look at this finger. I can't straighten it. I'll never be able to do it. And this is what happens. Great athletes deal with these things. I'm glad Aaron Judge is dealing with this, understands he's got this. And I think, it seems like he's going to be okay. He's okay already.
Judge and Soto, Ruth and Gehrig. Think about that. And realistically, if you transported Soto and Judge back to the 1930s, they'd be better because they're bigger, stronger, faster, all of that stuff. But the impact that Ruth and Gehrig had, not just on the Yankees but on baseball, is it's all time. I don't know how this survives, and I would assume that Soto's going to be re-signed by the Yankees. I would think that's going to be the case, but the number's going to be over 500. It may even tickle $600 million. And this is Hal Steinbrenner. This is not George Steinbrenner. And Hal is already saying, well, we do have our limits. Well, it'd be a shame to break that up. I think whether you hate the Yankees or not, and I guess if you're a fan of the Orioles, you would automatically hate the Yankees. If you're certainly living in New York and you're a Mets fan, you hate the Yankees. That goes with the territory. But there's no denying that when the Yankees are good, it's better for the game of baseball. Yeah, it's something to shoot at. I believe in dynasties. I believe that it's better for the sport right now, like the NFL. Not that the NFL needs this, but the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs are a dynasty is a good thing for the NFL. It is. We had the Golden State Warriors. That may be a dynasty that's over with, but I think it was absolutely good for the NBA for the last 10 years. And the Yankees are like an all-time dynasty. We're talking about 100 years of being overall the best team in the sport. And so if you have these two marketable stars, two guys who, chicks dig the long ball, that's probably not, you can't say that now, it's not politically correct, but it was 20 years ago, 25 years ago, that is a good thing for the sport. And for Tony to use Ruth and Gehrig for Judge and Soto, it's not as blasphemous as you might think. It actually, in this day and age, makes some sense. And be curious to see what ultimately happens with Soto at the end of the year. They're more than likely going to take him to free agency. Scott Boras just doesn't sign deals, except rare cases like Steven Strasburg, before the deal runs out. So I would expect that he will get his money, and he will get it from the Yankees. And we're talking about a contract that could be, not necessarily. But with Ohtani getting $700 million, why not over $600 million for Juan Soto, even though he's not a pitcher, but neither is Ohtani right now. Coming up in the next hour, we'll explore the controversy of Caitlin Clark a bit more. And 50 years ago today, 10-cent beer night in Cleveland. Yeah, seemed like a good idea at the time. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. What could possibly go wrong? We charge fans 10 cents a beer. More people show up, they have a few drinks, they feel good, the game goes on, we make money with all the tickets sold. What could possibly happen to screw that up? We'll find out. 50 years ago today, the Cleveland Indians tried 10-cent beer night. The most amazing thing is they did it again. Yeah, we'll talk about that later this hour. And who would have thought that Caitlin Clark would be the eye of the storm of sports? That what we're talking about is a raging controversy involving the WNBA. Absolutely remarkable. We'll get to a variety of angles on that coming up. In fact, coming up now. Why don't we get things going with that right away? And if you are aware of what happened over the weekend, there was a game between the Indiana Fever and the Chicago Sky. And late in the game, Caitlin Clark, who is, you can argue this, and some are arguing the fact that she is the one who is the most important person in the WNBA, but she's bringing the eyeballs. She's bringing them fresh off the national championship game in which 18 million, watched that versus 14 million for the men, and she was the reason. Her team lost, but she created a sensation in the month of March leading into the WNBA season, which started last month. So it was not much of a time between professional and amateur basketball, and she is the golden goose. And late in the game, Chennedy Carter of the Chicago Sky, while Caitlin Clark was just standing there, slammed into her, knocked her to the floor. It was called a foul. It was later upgraded to a flagrant after the game, and she got a $1,000 fine for it. But nobody from the Indiana team went to Caitlin Clark's defense, and it is now back and forth on all the talk shows of, what should happen here. There are some who say, well, welcome to professional basketball, kid. There are others who say, what are they doing? Why are they not protecting her? And then she is trying to maintain an air of, okay, I understand this, goes with the territory. I need to improve my game. She had only 3 points in her last game. Also, the league hasn't helped them either. Of their 11 games so far, they were played in a period of 19 days. She's worn out. And so here we are now with the debate going on about this and whether or not there's blame to be passed around on this, or is this just part of what it takes to get into professional basketball. We had the Jordan rules when he first started in the NBA. The Pistons used to knock him around. And what did he do? He went to the gym, he built himself up, and became, I think, the greatest player of all time. But after refusing to talk about the foul when it happened on Saturday, Chennedy Carter did appear at a news conference yesterday and said this.
I don't have any regrets with anything. I'm going to compete and play 100% hard no matter who it is, like I said, or who we're playing. No, I don't have any regrets.
Did you realize this was going to become a big national story?
It has become a big national story. We've had things that have been thrown into hoops like racism and just different things thrown to players that shouldn't even been brought up. This is a game I love. This is a game I'm passionate about. And at the end of the day, I'm thankful that I'm able to display it to everybody. And if you're going to watch the game, watch all of the game before you make opinions. Just watch the whole game and get to know the players. Those that saying you don't know players, you haven't watched the WNBA. Get to know your players that are already here and already in this league and already trying to make a mark.
I'm not sure how well you have to know a player to know that when you see that player slam into a player who's just standing there, that's not acceptable. Do you need to see the whole game to know what happened there? What did Caitlin Clark do anything to agitate Chennedy Carter? Did she? And we also saw, if you watch the video, she seems to mouth the B word before she slams into her. There's some real jealousy going on here. And Angel Reese, who started her career at Maryland, played at LSU, played in the Final Four against Caitlin Clark twice, first time beating her for the national championship. She believes that all this hoopla, this isn't about Caitlin Clark. Not necessarily. She's part of the picture, but as Angel Reese says, so is she.
It all started from the national championship game, and I've been dealing with this for 2 years now. And understanding, negative things have probably been said about me, but honestly, I'll take that because look where women's basketball is. People are talking about women's basketball, but you never would think that we'd be talking about women's basketball. People are pulling up to games. We got celebrities coming to games, sold out arenas, just because of one single game. And just looking at that, I'll take that role. I'll take the bad guy role, and I'll continue to take that on and be that for my teammates. And if I want to be that, and I know I'll go down in history, I'll look back in 20 years and be like, yeah, the reason why we watching women's basketball is not just because of one person. It's because of me, too, and I want y'all to realize that.
Yeah, you're involved. It's like Batman. Batman had Mr. Freeze, the Riddler, the Joker. Caitlin Clark's Batman. You're a supporting character. And if you believe that women's basketball took off because of that national championship game, yeah, it got a boost. And almost 10 million people watched the game. But the following year, this past March or April, there were almost twice as many people watching, more than twice, or almost twice as many people watching that championship game. So, yes, you play a role in this. It's not just one person, but that one person is driving the bus. You are a passenger on the bus. You are an important part of the story, but Angel Reese, you're not the story. And if you want to try and drive this woman out of the league, you'll see what your ratings are. You'll see how many celebrities start showing up at the games. You need, and when Wilbon's about to get into this here, you need the racial aspect of this. Yes, race is playing a factor in this, no question about it. And this is Tony and Mike yesterday on PTI as they looked at what is, I don't want to say a raging controversy, but it's a controversy in sports. And I thought Wilbon was really eloquent in the way he described what is going on here with the way Caitlin Clark is being treated as a rookie in the WNBA.
The discussion about Caitlin Clark has to deal with, and I mean initially and loudly, race and culture in America. That's part of this. And basketball is the place, Tony, where it's more often discussed historically. Yes, it started maybe with Jackie Robinson and with certain prize fighters, Jack Johnson, but it's been a basketball discussion. When it was about Larry Bird and Magic Johnson and the sort of enemies they were before they became deep and abiding their friendship. But I mean, I remember with Spike Lee, an important part of his movie making dealt with Bird and dealt with a white basketball player in America, because there ain't one on the male side. It's Caitlin Clark. And it's okay for people to admit that they identify with some. I identify with people, maybe part of why I identify with Edmonton, or people like Evander Kane and Darnell Nurse, who are people of color. And so it's okay to identify that. You're not going to find that white American star in men's basketball. Caitlin Clark is that. And she brings people into the tent because she's great and she's unique. In this case, she's white in a sport of black people. That's part of the deal. Part of the deal.
No
a big
argument
part.
on any of that.
Elephant in the room.
No. So here's the thing. I've watched, I think, part of or all of almost every game she has played in the WNBA. I watched both games over the weekend. She is being deliberately hit. And let me stress, deliberately. It's a little bit more dangerous, a little bit more sinister than just a hard welcome to a new league. It appears that the intent sometimes is to injure her. And what's particularly disconcerting is when somebody who knocks her down is welcomed back by her teammates saying, yeah, congratulated, basically. It leads to two conclusions, Mike. One is the Indiana teammates, when are they going to stand up for Caitlin Clark? Because they have not done that yet. When are they going to do that? Or else they're saying to Caitlin Clark, we don't have your back. And if they don't have her back physically, why is she playing on that team? And two, is there a living, breathing commissioner in the WNBA? Because if there is, that person has to say to all the players in the WNBA and all the coaches in the WNBA, hey, we're not going to have this anymore. We're going to make sure you understand these fouls are flagrant fouls. They're going to lead to ejection. If they happen more than once, they're going to lead to suspension. This season cannot be the hazing of Caitlin Clark. And Mike, you and I both talked about this at length, and we understand, but there's a lot of resentment of Caitlin Clark and how famous she is and how popular she is and how much money she makes off the court, because everybody in the league wants that. Raise your hand. Everybody in the league wants that. But people in the league have to realize also that the eyeballs are on the league right now because of Caitlin Clark. So you can beat her in a game because you know what? She's not great now. She is not great now. You can tie her up in the game. That's fine. You just can't try to hurt her.
But Tony, Tony, you're not going to legislate this. It's never legislated. That resentment that you described is what we have to get at. And people don't want to get at it, or they get at it clumsily, or they're not sophisticated enough to understand the resentment, why it's there, and how it's going to have to play out. Tony is going to have to play out on the court. There's no commissioner who's going to legislate that, the hard fouls, and if there is resentment and over what, there's going to have to be discussion. And there's not honest, candid discussion. So you know what?
Not yet.
We're going to have this. And I'm not for flagrant foul. Okay, you can call that. That's taken care of on the court. And her teammates, I hear you on all that. But guess what? I told you when this was going on in Iowa, I was not the real basketball world. I lived next door all my life. I grew up there in Illinois. Now Caitlin Clark's in the real basketball world, just like Larry Bird was in it. And he had to navigate it. And it took like much of his career. And then it went away, didn't it? Because of what happened on the court organically.
Well,
Caitlin Clark will have to get to that point, Tone.
There's a substantial difference.
What?
Larry Bird and Magic Johnson came into this league and immediately were great players.
Yeah.
Immediately.
Yeah.
She is not immediately a great player. There is a difference.
Okay, not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, and will she get there? We'll see. It kind of reminds me of Pete Maravich. Caitlin Clark broke his scoring record in college. You can look at that any way you want to, but she did, score more points as a collegian than Pete Maravich. Maravich came in the league in 1970. He had commercials. Not a lot of guys had commercials in those days, and he had like hairspray commercials because he had this great mop of hair on his head, and he had a little bit of a shtick in that he used to wear these floppy socks that somebody found in an old laundry room at LSU. And he may have been resented by the players and wasn't great at the beginning. Did become a great player and a flashy player, but didn't take over the league. Magic and Bird did. And the fact that they came in as a duo with the contrast, and race was a big part of it, that was key. Caitlin Clark comes in alone as a smaller, she's about 6 feet tall, but smaller white woman who had captured the nation. And yes, there are African-American stars from the WNBA, and they go, whoa, why is she getting all the attention? Why should she get any favors? We're going to show her that we play a different brand of basketball here, and if she doesn't like it, too bad. Now, this is also spilled over into now a media controversy because yesterday on the Pat McAfee show, McAfee, who's white and says whatever the hell he seems to want to say, he's got a deal with ESPN where he doesn't really work for ESPN. They just pay him to put the show on. He came out and in defense of Caitlin Clark, he lives in Indianapolis, played for the Colts, has been at games for the Fever. He called Caitlin Clark a, quote, white bee, using the full word, which I guess he's allowed to do on ESPN. The boundaries have been stretched a little bit there. And then so Mike Freeman, who is an African-American columnist with USA Today, says that Pat McAfee needs to go. He says that's misogynist and racist trash. McAfee later apologized. He said, I shouldn't have used the word bee as a descriptor of Caitlin Clark. No matter the context, even if we're talking about race being a reason for some of the stuff happening, I have way too much respect for her and women to put that into the universe. My intentions when saying it were complimentary, just like the entire segment, but a lot of folks are saying that it certainly wasn't that at all. That's 100% on me, and for that I apologize. I have sent an apology to Caitlin as well. Everything else I said is all facts. And Freeman writes, well, not all facts. In part of the rant, McAfee talked about how Clark basically put Iowa basketball on the map. However, Iowa made the NCAA tournament 10 of the last 12 years prior to Clark arriving. Yes, that's true, Mike, but nobody was really excited about Iowa playing in the NCAA tournament until Caitlin Clark got there. Let's face it. I mean, and they had never made the Final Four until they did her 2 years ago. So, yeah, I don't buy that. He says, this is Freeman, he says, I don't think McAfee apologized because of a conscience or introspection. I think he did out of sheer panic and fear of being blackballed by Clark and the Indiana Fever. They're certainly not going to get rid of him because he's already blown out an executive, been there 40 years in Norby Williamson. So he's the straw that's stirring the drink there, and they're not going to dump him. But more from Freeman, he said about McAfee, his apologies also don't seem to mean much since he constantly issues them and doesn't seem to learn or want to learn or how to grow from his mistakes. He apologized over the lies of Aaron Rodgers. He apologized sort of for the dumb Larry Nassar post on X. He apologized for some insane rumor about Raiders owner Mark Davis. Now there's Clark at ESPN, and they seem incapable of dealing with McAfee, which, is true to an extent. They don't want to mess with her. So, what was a warm and fuzzy, here's this Iowa girl, grew up with two brothers. The family shows up at the games. She makes the symbol of a heart to her family after every game. The teammates love her. It's a wonderful story about a coach, and Lisa Bluter, who coached college basketball in Iowa her whole life. And at the end, she has this transcendent star where people notice her. And now she comes to the WNBA, and oh boy, it is a lightning rod situation. And where this is going to go from here, we'll see. I think the next game, because the Mystics are playing tonight, they're playing in Connecticut as they take an 0-8 record there to an undefeated team. That doesn't look good. But Friday night, the Mystics are playing here against Caitlin Clark and the Indiana Fever, and the game has been moved from Southeast to Capital One Arena. Are the Mystics playing all their games at Capital One Arena? No, they're not. They're playing this game because they know they can sell, 19,000 tickets or 20,000 tickets. That's why they're playing there on Friday night. And whatever Angel Reese and some of the others want to say about, it's not all about her, it's all about her. It's all about her right now, both good and bad, both positive and negative. And she still needs to develop into a great player, because if we're sitting here a year from now and she's scoring 3 points in a game like she did the other night against New York, I think the circus is going to leave town. And she will be a somewhat forgotten story. Coming up, 50 years ago today, it was 10-cent beer night in Cleveland. What could possibly go wrong?
The Andy Poland Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Mike Callow is in for Tony at 11 o'clock. This is a story that took place in Cleveland, but actually has roots in Washington, D.C. And it's what happened 50 years ago tonight at Cleveland Municipal Stadium, which was a monstrosity of a ballpark. I think it held over 60,000 people, maybe over 70,000 people for baseball. It was a multi-purpose stadium. That's where the Cleveland Browns played, and that's where the Cleveland Indians played. And on this night 50 years ago, they were playing the Texas Rangers with a promotion. It was 10-cent beer night. That's right. You could go to the game with $1 in your pocket and buy a 50-cent bleacher seat. Not that you could see the field from that monster of a park, but you could be in the park for 50 cents and have enough money left over for 5 beers. It was not a good idea. Seemed like a good idea. People were interested in going to the game and getting beers for 10 cents, even though the price at the time was only 65 cents. But the difference of 55 cents in those days was significant enough that people said, hey, we can go have a good time for not a lot of money. So it was well received. But there is now background on this. The Texas Rangers were the team that they were playing. The Texas Rangers had been the Washington Senators. And on September 30th, 1971, they played their last game as the Senators at RFK Stadium. And they were playing the New York Yankees, and it was an emotional night because everybody knew that the team was playing its last game there before moving to Texas. And Frank Howard, who was the most beloved player, the best player on those expansion Senators who played in D.C. from 61 through 71, hit a home run against the Yankees to put them at front. And all they needed was one more out to close out the game with a victory and send the Senators off in style. But the fans were agitated. They were agitated that the team was leaving. They were agitated that the American League had approved the move. And things started to happen as I think it was Joe Grisenda, who was on the mound, looking to close it out. And the fans started spilling out of the stands. And they picked up bases, and they picked up clumps of dirt. And they were letting their anger be known that they were losing their baseball team, and they did not want it to happen. And it was a forfeit as they could not get order restored. They had to call the game in favor of the Yankees. Even though they were behind, it was 9-0. There were no more forfeits in baseball for the next few years. The Texas Rangers, as they became known when they moved to Texas in 1972, were a bad team in a bad ballpark, a converted minor league park. And they weren't drawing anybody until they brought up an 18-year-old phenom named David Clyde, who had had his high school graduation 2 weeks earlier. And he didn't pitch phenomenally well, but he pitched well enough that people were interested, and they had a huge crowd for this game. For them, it was like 28,000, and that is what is seen as saving the franchise in Texas. So they survived, and they're now in the 1974 season. Billy Martin is the manager, And on May 29th, they have a game in Arlington, Texas, as is outlined in a story by Fred Frommer in today's Post. And in the 8th inning, Texas second baseman Lenny Randle, angered that the previous pitch had nearly hit him, laid a drag bunt down as pitcher Wilcox charged to field it. Randle ran out of the baseline and clotheslined him. This is how baseball was in those days. Cleveland first baseman John Ellis tackled Randle, sparking a benches-clearing brawl. Tom Grieve, who was a player on that team and had actually played for the Washington Senators, talked about it. He said it was kind of a masterful attempt to get back at the pitcher. The beer was flowing that night in Texas, and it was always hot there, so people were drinking beer. And a video of the incident shows an irate Dave Duncan, the Cleveland catcher, who would go on to become a great pitching coach, scaling the dugout roof to go after a fan who had hit him with a full can of beer before teammates were finally able to drag him down. They got order restored. The game was over. And Billy Martin just inflamed things, noting that they would be playing 5 days later in Cleveland on 10-cent beer night. And he said, "Oh, Lord, that's just what we need." And he said they don't have enough fans, though, there to worry about. And they weren't drawing very well, but with 10-cent beer night on this night 50 years ago, they drew 25,000 people buying 10-cent beers, which was a prescription for disaster. Well, not only were the beers 10 cents, but a number of those 25,000 who came to drink came already lit up. And that's what really caused all the problems. Brian Kenny is a comedian from Cleveland, lives in Cleveland, loves Cleveland. Not the Brian Kenny that you see on the MLB Network or used to be on ESPN. There's a different Brian Kenny. But here's his description of what happened at Cleveland Municipal Stadium 50 years ago today.
Yeah, they kept drinking at the game, but it was 3.2 beer. 3.2 beer is about 25% weaker than a Bud Light. These people weren't going to get drunk enough to riot off of 3.2 beer. This city is a lot of things, but a city of lightweights is not one of those things. Now, the crowd was rowdy from the jump. From the very beginning, people were rowdy, but it was pretty lighthearted to start with. It was pretty much just nudity for the first couple innings. A lot of nudity. Things escalated later on in the game when a fan ran on the field and tried to take a Rangers player's hat as a souvenir. Billy Martin saw this, told his players to go get back and charge the field to go get their boy. And Indians fans responded to that by tearing apart the seats that they were sitting in to grab as weapons, pieces of their seats as weapons to fight the Texas Rangers. Savage motherfucker. Hell, the Indians players ran onto the field as a professional courtesy to fistfight their own fans to protect the Rangers as they ran back to their dugout. Now, was it our proudest moment? No, but nobody got seriously hurt. 7 people had to go get checked out at the hospital for minor injuries. That's it, less than a dozen arrests. No harm, no foul. After the game, Indians GM Phil Sagi blamed the umpire for not keeping better control of the crowd. He saw what the Indians fans did, and he was not about to risk blaming them. And he was right not to blame it on the 10-cent beers. 3.2 beers at 10 cents a pop are not going to do that to people. People aren't going to riot over that. Beers were only 65 cents in the first place. And yeah, inflation figured in. $1 back then is worth $5 now, so that's like $3.25 a beer. Hold up. Why is beer not $3.25 now? Who should riot about that? And the best part about all of it is you would think that after that riot that they would say, okay, no more 10-cent beer night. This is why we can't have nice things. You can't have beer for a dime anymore, Cleveland. But what really happened is Cleveland had a 10-cent beer night 6 weeks later. That's real. Look it up. God, I love this city.
Yeah, in fact, they did. They had another 10-cent beer night after this. Now, here's more details of what happened. In the second inning, according to Frommer, a woman came on the field, exposed her breasts as fans hollered their approval and tried to kiss umpire Nestor Shilak, who rebuffed her advances. Although the promotion was clearly not designed to draw families to the ballpark, a father and son duo engaged in some 1970s-style familial bonding, jumping on the field and mooning the players in the 5th inning. Then things really escalated, and there was a fan named Terry Yurkic, who was 19 years old. And 10 years ago, when they did the 40th anniversary of this, he said he ran onto the field and grabbed the hat of Jeff Burroughs. You remember Jeff Burroughs, he started his career with the Senators and moved to Texas with them. His son actually recently just passed away. But Burroughs was standing there, and this drunk fan comes on the field and grabs his hat. And as Jurkic recalled, Burroughs turned around, kicked him in the thigh, then stumbled. Fans started pouring on the field, and then the Rangers dugout, and then Billy Martin grabbed the bat and told his players to grab a bat and then go run onto the field with that. I mean, it was unbelievable what was happening. This is Burroughs. A day later, a young Vern Lundquist, who was a local sportscaster in Dallas, makes the trip to Cleveland. I don't think he normally traveled with the team, but now you got a story. So he goes to Cleveland the next day to start interviewing Rangers players with their views of what happened in this wild night that and I'll get to what ultimately happened there, but this incredible amount of mayhem that happened in Cleveland with fans lit up on the 10-cent beers.
Well, a lot of the fans got a little rambunctious there after 4 hours drinking beer, and they just came out and they were trying to steal my hat and my glove and other things, and then they got a little more violent, and then I just had to protect myself a little bit, so I defended myself against a couple of them. Then looked like America invading China. It was looked like about 3,000 of them started coming out, and then I thought it might be a little bit of trouble. Then I looked up, and luckily the Cleveland Indians were running to my defense, and along with the rest of my team. So it was all in all, it was kind of like professional baseball players versus the world last night, and I really don't know if anybody can come out on top in a sorry situation like that, and I'm just sorry it happened, and I'm just glad no one really got hurt.
Yeah, nothing serious, but they did have some people checked out at the hospital. This was Billy Martin. Billy Martin would die in a drunk driving accident 15 years later. There's still to this day question whether he was driving the car or his buddy Bill Reedy was driving the car. Reedy was behind the wheel anyway when the police showed up. Martin died. Reedy survived. But leave it to Billy Martin to put this perspective on what happened that night, 10-cent beer night in Cleveland.
I just think it was just a bunch of kids that just couldn't handle their liquor, and those aren't the real good baseball fans in Cleveland. I feel kind of sad because this has always been, although it has been drawing of late, always been a good baseball town, and you hate to see this happen in our great game of baseball. And I think we're going to have to take some stronger measures so people that run on the field and whatever it may be.
Yeah, the final straw in that game was the umpire, Shylock, getting hit in the head with a steel chair. And he said, I figured as long as they're not shooting or anything like that, we'll get it done. But all of a sudden, I felt some pressure behind the left heel of my shoe. I turned around, looked down, and there was a hunting knife sticking in the ground right behind my shoe. That's when I said, game, set, match, we're out of here. He declared a forfeit against Cleveland, meaning a 9-0 win for Texas. It was the first Major League Baseball forfeit since 1971, when the Senators gave up a victory to the Yankees in their final game in Washington as fans stormed RFK in another scene of mayhem. Again, they did do this 6 weeks later, but there were a lot of cops there, a lot more cops there, and they managed to keep things under control. But, when you look at the history of baseball and some of the things that have been done, this is one for the books. And we've had Disco Demolition Night, which took place 4 years later in Chicago. That was a disc jockey by the name of Steve Dahl who encouraged fans of the White Sox to bring their old disco records so they could blow them up in the infield, which they did between games, but it caused such mayhem with fans spilling out of the stands and tearing up things that they had to call a forfeit for the second game because the field wasn't playable. So, wow. This is one to remember. June 4th, 1974, and in Cleveland, Ohio, as it was absolute mayhem, which ended in a forfeit for the Texas Rangers as they won 9-0. Not that they were innocent in this, with Billy Martin, telling his players to grab bats and run onto the field, but that's how they settled it. Nestor Shylock, once he saw the knife, he said, "That's it. We're done. We're out of here." All right, I'm out of here. Mike Callow's coming in next for Tony, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.